Hello and welcome to Around the Lake for this week. My name is Josh Brokaw of the Ithaca Times, and I am your incredibly underdressed host. I'm here with Michael Donato of the Ithaca Shakespeare Company, and we're going to talk about their upcoming production, Richard II. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
We're all very thankful that you've come out in full costume here with the chainmail under these bright lights.
I actually prefer this to how I dress in my day job. If I could get away with doing this all the time, I think I would.
You'd probably be a bit safer.
Except when driving, it's a little uncomfortable to get this behind the wheel.
Yeah, I suppose those outfits were not meant for driving modern automobiles.
No, not an automobile anyway. Yeah, driving other things, but not cars. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the upcoming production. You're actually conveniently headed on your way to a dress rehearsal, final dress rehearsal.
Final dress rehearsal. Show opens tomorrow night, Friday the 13th. Lucky opening, and it'll be a production of Richard II, which is the first in the series of Shakespeare history plays. It's thought, the best way to describe it, I think, is the original Game of Thrones. It's the story of the transition in the monarchy in England, starting in the late 1300s and then running through the next couple of hundred years, lots of upheaval of deposing one king and installing another, and the conflicts that led to all of that.
So betrayal, violence, as much nudity as the Game of Thrones and HBO.
All of the above except the nudity, and that can be grateful.
So you can bring the kids.
You bring the kids. It's family friendly. It's no more violent than most Saturday morning cartoons, which means people do die on the stage, figuratively. But it's the opposite of what people think about when they think about history. They're called the history plays, and that's descriptive, but in a larger sense, that's really a misnomer. These are plays about power, ambition, betrayal, hatred, revenge, love.
They're about as much history as, say, an Oliver Stone film is history and is also
they're
drama.
Controversial. They were controversial in Shakespeare's time and now about how historically accurate they were, all of them. The most controversial in that respect, I think, is Richard III, but all of them are considered to be slanted by the artist and by the artist's time. See, they were written in Elizabethan England, which was a touchy time in England when there was lots of maneuvering to depose Queen Elizabeth. And the party line, if you wanted to be a favorite of the court, which Shakespeare was to write plays and stories that talked about how awful it would be to interrupt the proper succession of kings and the terrible things that happened to those who would depose a king. And Richard II starts all of that off. If I could, what this is about, it's the very critical juncture in English history where from the Middle Ages times, the medieval times, England was strictly following the divine right of kings. God chose the next king by making it the first son of the region.
And so no one could argue.
You can't argue, there's nothing to talk about, and it's God's agent. And if you interrupted that, if you went against the king, you were going against God. You weren't just going against the law. And people were believing that, or at least saying that they were believing it and going along with it for a long time. But the Richard II story is about a very pivotal point in that history where the God-selected king, Richard II, was really an awful, awful monarch. He was taxing the common populace into poverty, into rebellion.
He had a revolt at one point, a peasants' revolt, which came about, I believe, from my incredibly educated reading of the Wikipedia of his career, partially because of the plagues. I think peasants felt a little empowered because there were less of them. People were desperate for serfs, so they had some labor power there.
Your history's good.
And
they hated Richard. They hated Richard, and they rebelled. The rebellion was
adventures,
squelched. Right. And his response to that was terrible oppression of the poor and then heavy taxation of the poor, which he used to fund an extremely lavish lifestyle for himself and the people close to him in the court, and to fund unpopular foreign wars. There are parallels for our own country, yes? He compounded this by running out of money, borrowing money from nobles to be doing these sorts of things, and then he started to actually steal from the nobles, where he would take the lands and the goods of rich people who died. And the story here is, in Richard II, is that one of the very powerful nobility in the country, John of Gaunt, spoiler alert, it's a 400-year-old play, but here's some preview of what's going to happen. Old John of Gaunt dies, and the king steals the inheritance of his son. And now all the nobles say...
100% estate tax.
Yeah, pretty much. 100% estate tax goes to the state. And everybody... And this was the richest man in England. All right, it's like, Bill Gates dies, and instead of saying his heirs take, nope, the U.S. Treasury is going to take everything he owns. What does that do? Everybody who's rich in England says, whoa, we got to get this guy out of here.
Sure.
Because I'm the second richest guy in England, and you're the third richest, and you're the fourth. We got a bullseye on our head.
And when the rich decide to get some
and then the rich,
power,
so the poor were against them, the rich were against them.
Peasants get oppressed, but
right. But when the rich are against you, you got a big problem. All right.
So to expand your point about the, I think, a history play. It's not, it's not a full-length biography though of Richard II. It's only the last couple years when everything that has been set in motion over his.
It's the last couple of years when everything comes to a head, so that you've got incredible clashing and drama and tension and so forth. Yes, these are not biographies. These are not recounting histories. These are stories.
Sure.
The equivalent would be if you could imagine like a mini series of the United States, where they'd say we're going to start with Abraham Lincoln, and we're going to do some kind of greatest hits of like presidential conflict and who came to power and what they did with it and who knocked that party out and this party took over. And so we'd be interested in that, right? If you just kind of picked out, well, we're going to do Lincoln, and then we're going to do Eisenhower and Kennedy and Nixon and Bush and Clinton or something like that.
This is not a play about James Buchanan.
Right, exactly. These are about like the greatest hits of English royalty and at a time of incredible conflict, and so it makes for lots and lots of very interesting drama. People who are Shakespeare buffs often say these are their favorite plays. Like everybody loves The Tempest and Midsummer Night's Dream and et cetera. But the people who really love Shakespeare say this is some of the very best writing. The stories are intricate, but they're all tight. They're woven together. There's effortless things like political allegory and religious symbolism and all sorts of things that make it extremely rich. And it's also unusual in that this is one of the few plays that he did is all in poetry. It doesn't, the way the Ithaca Shakespeare Company does it, we don't do like, stand there and speak the rhyme so that it gives the beauty of the words. God, if you want to see that, go to England, go somewhere else. We try to make these people come alive. But the words are beautiful. They're some of the most beautiful speeches in Shakespeare's repertory, and they come out of the mouth of King Richard, not my character. My character is more like a blunt instrument. Richard II.
Who are you playing?
I'm sorry, I should have said that. I play Henry Bolingbroke, who becomes King Henry IV.
Yes.
Yeah. So the play, the central conflict of the play is Richard II, who is the king. He was the boy king, anointed at 10 years old. He lived his whole life as a king. He got to feel kind of privileged and
I can imagine,
right?
Yeah.
And like he could do and say anything he wanted, which led him to his excesses, which led to his downfall. Henry Bolingbroke is the guy who had his inheritance stolen from him, and he says, I'm getting it back, and I'm going to take it back by force. And the play is about, is that right? Is that wrong? How does that fit in with the divine right of kings? What do you do with an awful king? What do you do with a king who's upsetting the bedrock of English law, which is the passing of property according to proper inheritance and proper law and procedure. And so all kinds of what would you call them, traditions and institutions are like clashing into each other and falling apart. And that all kind of plays itself out in a couple hours.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about, well, you're heading to dress rehearsal.
Yes.
And as we know, people will be hurt on stage. However, we were talking about before we started shooting,
Right.
the how you keep from not hurting someone in these sword fights, in these stage fights, for you are using real swords. And you said you didn't bring your sword today because it's heavy and
It's heavy and a little dangerous.
Yeah. So,
the thanks for asking. No, the weapons that we use are real weapons. If they were used against you, they would hurt you a lot. I carry a 3-foot broadsword, and it weighs several pounds. Other people carry daggers and short swords and so forth. And we hire professional fight choreographers to work with us to make the movements both realistic and safe. And so you will see sword play, you will see people getting stabbed and run through with swords and so forth. And it'll look, with some degree of realism. I mean, no parts come off or anything. But people do get on stage grievously injured. And we do that by planning out what the movements are going to be such that we can do things that if you don't do them right, they do have a degree of danger to them.
what did you call the plotting out that you do in dress rehearsal?
Oh, well, I'm sorry. There's a fight choreography in which you set what the movements are going to be, and then there's a fight call before the play, before a performance, in which you go through the fights so that nobody kind of makes that mistake like, oh, I was only supposed to take 2 steps. I took 4, and now the sword is stuck in you. We don't want to make those kind of mistakes, and so we practice this. These shows that we put on are quite meticulously planned out. The fights are just one thing. And you see me in this garb here. We actually have a staff of people who create the costumes for us. We've got 4 people working on the costumes now. There will be 20 people out there on stage in full medieval regalia. Everything from gardeners and serfs and soldiers up to lords and ladies and kings. And there's a degree of historic accuracy to all of the costuming. We want it to be a visual pageant as well as delivering the emotion.
So where do your, I'm sure there's lots of fabrication that goes on, but where do your costumers source their materials from?
All over the place. Some of it.
A lot of eBay or?
There's a whole cottage industry that supplies a lot of this stuff. This you can buy.
Oh yeah, show the helmet.
Yeah, I've got a. This is a real helmet. You could wear this into battle. It's made out of chromed steel. Yeah, and it weighs.
You got the leather kind of.
Yeah, leather on the
in
inside. The reason for the discoloration is from makeup. I wore this in Hamlet back in the summer.
So these do have some reuse value.
Yeah, well, it's got some. Yeah, sure. This was the ghost of the dead King Hamlet wore this. So there's a little, white from there and some. I think there's still some blood on here. Yeah, there's some blood on the mail. Okay, so you can buy these things. There are recreation companies that sell some of these things, and so we buy the chainmail and we buy some of the other stuff like these leather epaulets and these things, and you can buy a full suit of armor if you want to spend enough money on it. But we have an extremely talented crew led by Lauren Cautery, who researches these things to the nth degree. And a lot of this stuff is just handmade custom for us. Wow. And so when you see those lords and ladies running around, I think 80-90% of what you see is local craftsmanship. It's really quite stunning what they do. And it makes for a huge difference. The very opening of the play puts out almost like people on a chessboard, puts out the family tree, so that you can see who these people are. You don't have to figure it out while you're going through the play. Here's the king, here's the king's sons, here's the sons of the sons, and here's who this guy is fighting this. And it's so obvious when you watch it. It's a thing of beauty. And when you see, this entire stage full of people wearing the period-appropriate costumes, it's a stunner. I mean, a lot of times you go to the theater and there's like, 3 people in a black box, and you can get some terrific art that way. But this is different.
This is not a minimalist
No,
production.
no,
or
we've got like a 20-page...
sort of Beckett type.
Yeah,
existential
No, we're not all
minimalism,
going to stand around in one suit waiting for Godot to show up. This is like we've got 20 feet of custom-built platform, a huge throne for the king. The platform moves in and out depending upon whether we're in outdoor or indoor scenes, and full costumes and real swords, and we go in the opposite direction. These are not restrained. These are Shakespearean.
So besides your costume designers,
Yes.
tell me a little bit more about those behind the scenes in the Ithaca Shakespeare Company. Who's directing this production?
Right. The direction is by our artistic director, Steve Ponton, and he's been heading the company for more than a decade now. He is a genius at this stuff. He understands these plays thoroughly, and he also has a terrific sense about how to spread people out on the stage, how to make them move, how to make them act in ways that are both visually interesting and natural, and then he really wants to focus on and bring out the emotion of it. It's all about making the people real and making the audience feel the emotion. If you want to just love the beauty of the words, you get that, but you can read the play. This is about seeing those people come to life and, screaming at each other and kissing each other and stabbing each other with swords, and, that's what's all brought about. There's too many other people for me to mention, but
Sure.
we have the benefit of the terrific talent that's here in Ithaca. We've got great theater programs at Ithaca College and also at Cornell, and there's also stuff going on at TC3, and then there's people who are professionals in the local community. So we get just really pro-quality lighting support, sound support. I mentioned we've got professional fight choreography. We have acting coaches, voice coaches. We kind of work on all aspects of what the performance is going to be so that when people come to see a show, they get a real experience. That's what we're driving at. And it's been successful. I mentioned Steve's been doing this for over 10 years. We put on several shows a year, and I'm going to, knock wood, we get great attendance. We get several thousand people a year to come to the shows. And thank you for the Tompkins County Tourism Grants, by the way. They give us money to help us do
get
this.
the plug-in.
Yeah, I love them. They help us very much. They have, they require that we keep some statistics about where people come from. And it's kind of shocking, actually. We do the summer shows, and we are regularly getting people from Rochester, Syracuse, Binghamton, Elmira, Corning. They always, and of course Ithaca, they always come. But last summer we had 21 different states and 8 different foreign countries. Wow. Right.
So you're bringing in people from out of town.
I don't know that they fly in from Singapore just to see us. I doubt that. But they come to Ithaca for all sorts of reasons. But this is part of the Ithaca summer experience, and we're trying to expand that now with the regular shows at the Hangar. And thanks to the folks at the Hangar, they're very accommodating to work with, and this is becoming, while they're in their off season, their summer show season primarily. We do our summer shows outdoors. So for the winter, we're doing regular shows there, and it's a wonderful, wonderful venue. Great for the audience, great for us.
Well, I guess do you have a few lines you could rip off as a little taste?
What kind of thing? What would I do? Well, you can get a sense of what I think about King Richard from this. I am seeing him while I have my armies massed behind him, and Richard is being indignant and trying to resist the idea that he's going to get thrown off the throne.
All right,
and
scene
so
set.
I see him at a distance, and I say, See, King Richard doth himself appear, as doth the blushing, discontented sun from out the fiery portal of the east, when he perceives the envious clouds are bent to dim his glory. So then, kind of contemptuous, etc. It's kind of hard to ramp up and do the kind of yelling, screaming sort of stuff, but
in a chair here with the potted plant.
Right. But then, I'll get angry at somebody.
If that confused you kids, think how much harder that is to read.
It's harder to memorize than other stuff.
Well,
it really is, yeah. But there's a lot of fiery stuff. I yell a lot. I send people to their death. I mean,
Do you like the yelling, the fiery sort of roles?
I
or-
love this role because it has terrific range. I do everything from screaming at people, sending people to their death, to weeping with guilt and grief. And I don't have the big role. The big role's Richard II. He's the show. John Keese, and he does just a terrific job. Very well trained, extremely experienced, and a wonderful actor. The cast is great. I love working with these people. There's nobody weak in the show. It's really quite a spectacle. And it's the first of the series. It's like you don't want to come into the second,
What other
volume.
plays are you planning on doing this year?
Well, this year we're going to do Henry IV in the summer and Midsummer Night's Dream, which is like a lot of people's favorites. And then next year we're going to do Henry V and then Richard III.
Okay.
We got just a couple of minutes, I guess. I feel like I should be yelling something, but
Well, people will have to come out for that. Well, then.
But I could say, something like that. Thou hast wrought a deed of slander with thy fatal hand. Something like that. There'll be some of that. Yeah.
I don't remember that I did anything that wrong this week, but,
Your hands have been pretty calm here, yeah. But
try to keep them together.
Keep them in line, because
Keep 'em
I
in
got
sight.
a whole army of people with real weapons behind me. Yeah.
Well, why don't you, I guess, kind of give the what, when, and where again?
What, when, and
forever.
where? At the wonderful Hangar Theater. We open tomorrow, Friday the 13th. We have
13th.
shows Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday matinee this week.
So what time do your shows?
I'm sorry, 7.
7 and
7 on tomorrow and Saturday, and then 4 p.m. matinee on Sunday. Next week, slightly different, 7 p.m. shows, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. All right, so if you want to come Sunday, it's this Sunday. If you want to come Thursday, that's next week. But Friday, Saturday, both these weeks. Tickets on ithacashakespeare.org.
There we go. All right, well, this is Michael Donato of the Ithaca Shakespeare Company. He'll be playing Henry Bolingbroke in their upcoming production of Richard II, starting tomorrow, Friday the 13th, as you just heard. I'm Josh Brokaw for the Ithaca Times, and this has been your Around the Lake for the week. See you next week. Goodbye.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
My heart this covenant makes, my hand thus seals it. Yeah. Yeah, that's another one of them.